Hi, I'm Dr. Andrews, and this is our first lesson together. So to get ready for this lesson 1A, make sure you have gone to the worksheets in D2L and printed this particular worksheet, and that you are ready to write, document, write down some glossary words, flashcards, whatever kind of notations you need to make so that you'll remember the details in this lesson and the lessons that come after this to help prepare you for your Math 1332 class. So starting with these support skills for Lesson 1, Part A, we are modifying this to make it work for online. And so it talks about that in the next class, you'll need to measure different types of quantities, gather data, and make decisions from the data you collect. When you actually do this in your 1332 class, it's going to vary depending on whether you have an online or a Monday, Wednesday, or a Tuesday, Thursday class. So know that all of this will go together and will make sense. So let's start here. It says, welcome to the first day of class, and start working through this handout while your classmates arrive. Well, we're just going to start working on it online. The idea with these lessons is that you will answer the questions or attempt the questions one at a time before watching this video. Like right now, if you don't have an answer or two down for question 1, pause the video, jot down a couple of thoughts, and then come back. The list of the examples that you make from everyday life will vary. Some things could include height, weight, weather, and news. You don't have anyone to share this information with unless you find someone in our class and y'all can work together either virtually or in person. But for right now, it's you and me. So for this question number 1, and let's go ahead and move on to question number 2. Fully understanding the vocabulary words will be vital for your success in this class and the 1332 course. So as you see the first word of a quantity, this is where I encourage you to start a glossary or flashcards or tagging and highlighting these words to make sure you really understand all the parts of this word. It is any characteristic of a situation that can be measured or counted. When we measure a certain quantity, we assign a numerical value to it. Different types of quantities can take on different forms, like volume, length, weight, etc. When we add or subtract quantities, make sure you're underlining this, they must be of the same type and of the same unit. So as we go through this information, make sure that you are underlining pieces that help you to remember and to strengthen your idea of these words, these vocabulary words. So in question 2, pause the video, go ahead and make your choices, and then come back to the video. They do ask us to match each quantity with a measurement by connecting lines between them. So water in a glass. Water in a glass, it's a cup, like a 3/4 of a cup. A person's height, that quantity would be like 5 feet and 6 inches. The duration of a movie. I've been to too many meetings this week. 1 hour and 49 minutes. Water in a bathtub. 80 gallons and a bag of oranges. So the lesson may be starting out fairly simple, but it's going somewhere. It's going to grow. So make sure you really understand all the pieces and parts of this definition and what it's trying to tell us. One of the purposes of this class is to go back and look at concepts that may be a little dusty or rusty, and to solidify those as you move into the 1332 class lesson. So this piece on your worksheet talks about converting fractions to decimals. You will need to underline some ideas here, like where it says in the previous problem we were given 3/4 of a cup. And it says that is a fraction, but another way to represent it is a decimal. And if you've seen this fraction written as a decimal before, but other decimals are less common. So let's review. The concept you need to know, make sure you understand, remember, is how to convert fractions into decimals. So it mentions that 3/4 can be written as 3 divided by 4, and this thing in the middle is called a vinculum. And by typing 3 divided by 4 into a calculator, make sure it's the same order as what you're speaking. you can confirm that you already know, or what you may already know, that 3/4 is going to show up to be 0.75 on your calculator, or 75 hundredths. This is a good time to pause and check that to make sure what you are supposed to be getting on your calculator is what you're getting. It then goes on to say sometimes mixed fractions can be used, like 1.5. And so one way to do this is to first find the decimal representation and then add. And that's what I mean by making sure you're taking good notes, writing this in a glossary or flashcards, that we're going to first find the decimal and then we're going to add the remaining whole number. For example, if we have 1 and 1/2, we're going to compute the 1/2 and then add it back to the 1 to get 1.5. So to help solidify this concept, we're going to practice. The directions ask us to convert each fraction into its decimal representation using your calculator. They ask us to first write the fraction using this symbol and then write the decimal form. You need to pause the video and you need to complete question number 3 and then come back and let's compare answers. So to begin, we have 1 divided by 8. They asked us to rewrite it 1 divided by 8, and then to punch this into our calculator. It doesn't tell us to round to any specific place value, so we're just going to write down that on our calculator we see 125 thousandths. We'll continue this process to get 7 divided by 8, and 7 divided by 8 is going to be 825 thousandths. I will use this leading 0 just because I think it looks better. The leading 0 can be left off, and this is still a good answer. Moving on, this is one that's a combo. So they asked us to take the 1 divided by 8 first, so we'll follow their directions and write and then calculate 1 divided by 8. And as we have above, we got 0.125 or 125 thousandths, and then add the whole number back in to get 1 and 125 thousandths. Finally, they've asked us to start with the fraction. So I'll write it 3 divided by 4, and we get what we got a while ago, 75 hundredths. And then they've asked us to add the 2, the whole number, back in. So 2 and 75 hundredths. As we continue down the worksheet, this next paragraph says that we can also use our calculator to add or subtract decimals. Underline what you think is important and what you want to remember. And then it says this is done by typing decimal values into your calculator and using the appropriate symbol. Again, this may be something you're very comfortable at doing, but we needed you to look at it one more time before you head into your 1332 class to make sure this information is solid so you can learn the new concepts in 1332. It mentions if we're going to add these numbers, we can put them in a calculator, and they're asking you to use your own calculator to determine the answer. So again, this is a great place to hit pause and then come back and check the answer. By typing this in the the calculator, we end up getting 2 and 875 thousandths. We keep going with questions 4 and 5, and now they're bringing the units back in. For each of the following problems, write each quantity in its decimal representation, and notice that it also has units associated with these. We're putting it all together, and as you get ready for our quizzes and tests and homework in 1332, make sure you have ways that you underline, focus, understand all the information given to us so that whenever we go to write our answer, we're confident that we've written a complete answer. So if they want 1/2 converted to a decimal, I'm going to type it into my calculator, or just know that it's 0.5 or 5/10. And this time I'm going to make sure that I add in my unit. In this case, we have the scenario of a whole number with a fraction. They've asked us to do the fraction first, and then to take the whole number and add it to the fraction, and we get 12 and 75 hundredths cups. Now it's time to pause the video again. You go work on questions 6, 7, and 8, and then come back and we'll walk through those together. Starting with question 6, it asks for the 5 and 1/7 inches. Now we're moving to another thought of rounding your answer to the nearest thousandth. Another skill that we need to practice. And when it says to practice the rounding, this is an area that I see my students struggle with on what is rounding and when do we round and where am I rounding to. So this is very important to practice right here before you get to your 1332 class. Notice this piece of information about our resource on rounding and estimation. In your 1332 class, you have My Math Lab, and My Math Lab has an in-class book, and then it has resources associated with it. That's where this rounding and estimation resource is. It's in your My Math Lab 1332 online resource. That would be a great resource to look at while or before or as a refresher on rounding. I'm going to follow what they've asked us to do and do 1 divided by 7, and I'm going to get, I'm looking at my notes here, I'm going to get a number like this on my calculator. And it keeps going. If they're asking us to round to a thousandth, I have a couple of things that I need to do. I still need to add my 5 back in, and I can round to the thousandth as I do that. With tenths, hundredths, and thousandths, the rounding rules tell us to find the place we are rounding to, look immediately to its right, and then make a judgment call. Is this 5 or greater or less than 5? With it being 5 or greater, our 2 will become a 3, and we have 5 and 143, 143 thousandths, and let's not forget our units. That's very important. We're going to move on down the page and do our 5/9 yards. When I put 5 divided by 9 into my calculator, I got about this decimal representation going on forever. This time I'm paying attention to the directions that ask me round to the nearest hundredth. Here's the hundredths place. I look immediately to the right, and with it being a 5 or greater, it will make my 5 go up to a 6. So this is about 56 hundredths of a yard. Finally, we're going to take 3, divide it by 7, and I'm getting about 42857 keep on going. And when it wanted me to round, in this case, to the nearest hundredth, 2 is in my hundredth spot. My 8 tells my 2 we're going up. And put my 15 in from the front end, and it's 15.43 or 15 and 43 hundredths of a gallon. We finished this worksheet putting all that we have done together. Again, I remind you, go ahead and stop or pause the video, do numbers 9 and 10 by yourself, and then come back. That's what we would do if we were face-to-face. You would be doing these by yourself or in groups of 2 or 3, and then we would come back and talk about them. But again, it's just you and me unless you're sitting in a group of people. So here we go on 9 and 10. You're going to pause, go work on those, and then come back. So question 9 now wants us to add 2 numbers, and then when we're done, round to the nearest thousandth. I'd like to caution you that if we round this one and then round this one and then round this one when we get done, we're going to create some error. We're not going to have an accurate number. So what we're going to do is we are going to round this, but not to the thousandth. We're going to go 1 past that to the 10,000th. We're going to do the same thing with this fraction. we're going to go on to the 10,000ths to help us to be more accurate. And then our final answer will come back and round just to the thousandths. So when I divide 1 by 3, I get about 0.3333333 forever. So my first number is 1 and 30, nope. That would be to the thousandths. We're going to go on to the 10,000ths, rounding this on out because it just keeps going to the 10,000ths. And so that 3 means nothing happens, everybody stays the same. I'm going to punch 4 divided by 11 in my calculator, and I'm getting, where did I write that? 4 divided by 11, I am getting 0.363636. You get the idea. We have a repeating number. And instead of rounding it now to the thousandth, I am going to go to the tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, and the number behind it, that 3, says I get to leave my 6 alone and drop everything behind it. So this number is actually 12 and 3636. They're asking us to add. I can do this in my calculator or on my paper, but I'm getting the number of 13.6969 or 6,969 10,000ths. Part of this class is paying attention to detail. They want us to round to the thousandth. So I'm going to change colors. It wants me to go to the thousandth, looking at the 9. That will make my 6 become a 7. Everything behind drops off. And I get 13.697 or 13 and 697 thousandths gallons. We'll finish this worksheet with question number 10. And the same process, I'm going to follow the same process, meaning that I'm going to convert the fractions to decimals. It wants me to round to the nearest tenth, so first I'm going to go to the hundredth, and at the hundredth I'll come back at the end after I subtract and round to the nearest tenth. So when I divide 7 by 8, I get about, and I'm looking for that one, I'm going to the hundredth, I get, trying to find where I wrote that one on my notes. So I just went straight to the number of 7 and 875 thousandths, which that means I'm trying to round to the hundredths. Whew! I get 7 and 88 hundredths quarts. I'm wanting to subtract 3 and 2 sevenths. So when I divide the 2 sevenths, looks like I'm getting, going to be 3 and 2, 8, 5, 7, 1, 4. Eventually we want the tenths, so we're going to carry on out to the hundredths, tenths, hundredths. Looking behind it, that means I need to move up to a 9, and I get 3 and 29 hundredths quarts. It's always really good to go back and remind yourself, I'm not adding, I am subtracting. So let's go over here, and let's take our 7 and 88 hundredths, subtract our 3 and 29 hundredths. You can do this in your calculator. You can do this by hand. But it looks like we're getting 4 and 59 hundredths quarts. However, paying attention, they want our final answer to be to the tenths. So looking at my 5, the 9 says go up 1. So final answer of 4 and 6/10 quarts. I am very excited to have you in this class, and that finishes our first lesson, 1A. Go find your calendar in the syllabus and see if you have more lessons that you need to complete before Friday night at 11:59 p.m.